What's going on, gardeners? It's Sunday, November 21st, and it's a beautiful fall day here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. And today I'm going to show all of you how to prune a citrus tree. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. Pruning a citrus tree is mandatory for its overall health, its overall performance and fruit production, and the overall aesthetics and looks of the tree itself. So it's very important that you do this every single year at the proper time. This is especially important if you live in a particularly cold climate where you're growing citrus and it's borderline for your climate. I live in Zone 8A, North Carolina. This is a Meyer Lemon bush growing that was a rooted cutting. It is not a grafted tree. And this is really a Zone 9A hardy tree. So I have to grow this under protection. And I have a hard freeze that is coming in next week, and I need to be prepared. So now is the perfect time to cut this tree back so I will be able to protect it more easily. Now, how exactly you prune your citrus tree and the aesthetics of the tree itself is up to you, because it's going to depend on your unique growing conditions, because there are many ways that you could be growing a citrus tree. You could be growing a citrus tree that is a rooted cutting or was seed grown and it's on its own feet or its own roots, and that can grow sort of like a bush more than an actual tree if you let it grow and sucker from the base naturally. I'm growing a Meyer Lemon like a bush because it will grow smaller and it's easier to protect and safer to grow up against a house foundation than if you were to grow it on a grafted rootstock. Now, for most growers out there, you're probably growing a grafted citrus tree on some type of rootstock with a desired characteristic of some sort. And whether you're growing a full-size citrus tree rootstock that can grow 20 to 30 feet tall, a semi-dwarfing citrus tree rootstock that'll dwarf it to about half, or some kind of dwarf that will keep it to being 6 or 7 feet or less, that is up to you as the grower and for your unique conditions. So prune your tree based on the size of the tree and the shape that you want it to be. Now, while all those different parameters that I mentioned can vary based on the grower and the individual tree that they're growing, the majority of principles when it comes to pruning citrus do not change from tree to tree. In citrus native subtropical climates, most citrus trees have 3 flushes of growth: an early spring flush, a summer flush, and an autumn flush. In most cases, only vegetative growth is formed on the summer and autumn flushes of growth, which will increase the overall size of your citrus tree. Inflorescences, which is the complete flower head of the plant, are generally formed in the early spring flush as a stress response to the low temperatures of winter. Therefore, the best time to prune a citrus tree is generally during the winter. Cutting them back now is ideal because you can greatly reduce the size of your overall tree a few months in advance of that early spring flush that will contain the inflorescences. That way, the citrus flowers will be produced on a smaller overall tree that will be easier to manage, and the tree will be able to better support the weight of the fruits by cutting the tree back. You don't want the fruits forming on this long, lanky growth because the weight of the fruits could snap the branches as they collect and weigh down. We want to cut these branches back closer to the trunk of the tree to better support our harvest. Now, it's true that some smaller fruited citrus bushes like kumquats, lemons, and limes, and even this Meyer lemon right here, can flower on a more irregular, ever-bearing pattern, and the behavior of your citrus tree may also be a little different if you live in the tropics and you don't have a stress-inducing cool season like we do here in the northern subtropics. But this is the general overall pattern for growth and flowering. Now, how much should you prune off of your trees? Most citrus growers say that you should prune anywhere from 20% to 1/3 of the overall canopy. If you live in a climate where you grow citrus out in the open and unprotected, but citrus can take some damage during winter freezes, it may be best to prune less so that the overall canopy can provide frost protection to the tree, and in the event you suffer some dieback on the tips of your branches, you can remove that dieback in the spring without taking heavy losses in the overall volume of the tree. For me, me, because I live in a climate where it's too cold to grow citrus outdoors unprotected, I actually need to cut my tree back more like a third so I can maintain it as a smaller bush and artificially protect it with incandescent lights and a plant jacket to keep my tree warm. So I'm going to remove closer to 33% of the canopy. Now, which branches should you remove? Number 1, any dead branches and branches showing signs of pest damage or disease should be removed. Number 2, any branches that are long and leggy, like this one that you can see up here. Number 3, if you have a grafted tree, remove any water shoots from the rootstock that are suckering from the base or below the graft. Any growth from below the graft must be removed. It steals energy from the overall tree, and eventually, if it grows too large, it could overtake the grafted scion wood and kill off your actual citrus variety, and you'll just be left with a nasty, generally inedible rootstock. This here is a tree that is grown from cutting. It is not a grafted tree, so I don't have to worry about that, but most citrus trees are grafted, so always check for where the graft is, usually 5 to 8 inches above the soil level. Look for that bend in the tree and remove anything below that graft. 4, any branches hanging down on the soil should be removed because they're prone to disease. Now for me, I have a bunch of fruit on the tree on these low hanging branches, and it's very dry here generally in the winter, so I'm not going to remove them this year. When the fruit ripens and becomes mature, I will probably eventually remove some of the branches that are on the bottom of the tree. If you are pruning your citrus as a tree and not as a bush like I am, if any of the branches are snapped or broken or hanging down on the ground, sort of like this, you may want to remove that because it could promote disease and block airflow. Number 5, remove any signs of swollen stems. Sometimes wasps like to get in citrus trees and they like to dig little slits in the branches and lay their eggs. So if you see any swelling in a branch anywhere, that may be indicative of pest eggs or a wasp nest. So make sure you remove those branches and dispose of them or burn them. Number 6, if you are growing your citrus as a tree instead of a bush like I am, you will want to cut out any branches growing inward or diagonally from the center of the tree. Keep your tree pruned to an open center to promote airflow, which will reduce your chances of disease. That'll be different if you're growing a bush like this, or if you're growing something like a satsuma that has a very weeping habit. But if it is an upright growing citrus tree, keep that open center. And 7, prune all of your branches to about the same length. Trees grow through a principle called apical dominance, where the longest branches tend to collect the most growth hormone. Keeping your tree as symmetrical as possible helps ensure even growth. An improperly balanced tree will tend to grow to the side with the longer branches, and you do not want that growth habit. Other tips: use sharp pruners and a handsaw like this Japanese pull saw that I have linked in my Amazon storefront and love so much. Use these pruners for the small green branches and the new growth. Use a fine saw like this for any kind of lignified hardwood or any kind of branches that are a ½ inch in diameter or more. Of course, clean and sterilize your tools before use with either isopropyl alcohol, really hot soapy water, or a diluted bleach solution. And if you are pruning multiple trees, re-sanitize them in between from tree to tree so you don't transmit any kind of diseases from tree to tree. And also, consider wearing gloves if you're pruning a thorny tree. So here's an example of a few branches that we're going to want to remove. You see how there's some pest damage all over these leaves, and they're very scraggly and gangly looking. Same thing with this branch way up here. This is what you would call some kind of water shoot or water spout. It's growing way too tall, way too quickly. It's green wood. It's not actually lignified wood, and because it grew so fast, it's not surviving well. It's not tolerating well to pest damage. You can actually see there's some leaf miner damage all over this leaf right here. And so anything like that that shows leaf miner damage, pest holes in it, you can see where the leaf miner was crawling all over it. You want to remove all of that wood. And what you want to be basically left with is with the really nice looking deep green stable growth that is down here, and not the really funny looking kind of ugly growth that is up here on the top of the branches. So we're going to cut all of that funky looking growth We're going to cut all of that off. You can see how sickly looking a lot of that growth is. All of that is going to be gone, and we're going to do it in a symmetrical way so our plant is as balanced as possible. One of the things I'm constantly doing as I prune is I'm looking to where the wood started to lignify. You can see that brown streaking in here. That means that wood is starting to turn into hardwood. Then it stops at this node and it turns into this soft green hardwood. What I'm often doing is I'm cutting around this node. So I want to cut it back basically to that hardwood, because that hardwood is going to be that much stronger wood that is going to survive the winter, and then you'll get new flushes out at this node. And we're always going to cut off this sickly growth back to the new growth, or back to the old growth that is really beautiful and pristine. And then we just want to kind of cut out any of these weird diagonal growing shoots that are growing kind of into the center against the grain. We kind of want all of the growth to be growing out if possible. We don't necessarily want to crowd the inside of the tree because we do want to maintain airflow. So we'll cut out a couple of these inward growing stems. And here are the final results of pruning my Meyer Lemon citrus bush. Now, as you can see, the tree is overall much better balanced. However, it is not perfectly balanced. It's definitely leaning more to this side. And that is because this is the bush's second year in ground and really first full calendar year in ground. So this was its first true pruning. And it takes about 2 or 3 prunings to really balance your bush or your tree. So this is the initial shaping. As it grows and the trunk thickens out more and it'll overall get thicker on the bottom, it will put out stronger branches that will be easier to balance with subsequent prunings. So don't try to make the tree completely perfect its very first pruning. Shape it over 2 or 3 years. You'll also notice that I was fairly aggressive with the pruning. I probably did prune off a true third of this tree. And while this pile looks probably a little bit larger than a third of the overall mass of the tree, remember, most of the very thick wood is at the bottom. Most of the mass of the tree is at the trunk. And most of these branches, while they look like they take up a lot of volume, they're very thin. So it's not quite as stressful as you think it is. Citrus is very vigorous and it's not going to flower for probably another 3 to 4 months. So there is plenty of time for this tree to recover. Don't worry about the pruning stress because citrus, like I said, are very vigorous and they are evergreen trees. They won't go dormant on you. They will continue to grow and recover throughout the cool season. And just to take you in for a bit of a closer look, this is how the citrus tree looks now. I balanced it as best as I could, considering it's such a young tree. I also tried to prune it out as best as I could to an open center, so I should hopefully be able to get some better airflow in here. In subsequent years or later years, I'm probably going to cut out these branches that are growing inward just to open the center up more, but I don't want to prune it any more than I already did this season. Another thing I did was I cut out all of the branches that were growing into my house. So definitely redirect that growth away, cut off the back, and allow it so there's airflow if it's planted near a house for protection like I did with mine. And as always, when you undertake such a heavy pruning job the very first season, there's always usually a mishap or two. Number one, I did accidentally cut off one of my Meyer Lemons that was just starting to turn yellow. Unfortunately, I lost this one. I'm going to leave it on my counter and see if it ripens. It does feel pretty close, so maybe it'll be okay. But again, be very careful when you prune that you don't lose any of your beautiful, precious fruits. And number two, I should have followed my own advice and wore gloves because I impaled my finger with one of the thorns on this Meyer Lemon bush. They're only semi-thornless. There's still thorns in there on a Meyer Lemon. So do as I say, not as I do. I should have followed my own advice and put on a pair of gloves. I actually had to stop filming because I got in there pretty good and I didn't want to bleed all over my tree. And after pruning, we're also left over with this nice big pile of cut off old branches. This makes fantastic mulch. Don't just throw it out. Spread it underneath your citrus trees or your other fruit trees. It makes a really nice ground cover. It'll prevent weeds and it'll break down all winter and refeed your soil. And that is how you prune a citrus tree. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Everybody, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you found it helpful, please make sure to hit that like button and ring that notification bell so you're notified when we upload more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in my garden in general, or you're interested in my pruning saw or my shears, they're all linked in my Amazon storefront down in the video description. And check out my spread shop for custom-made merch while you're there if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. So I'm chopping up a salad for dinner, and there's no sign of Dale. He's upstairs sleeping, so I guess he doesn't want any carrots and celery and lettuce, but now I have to go get some cheese. I wonder what will happen if I have to go inside the cheese drawer and get some cheese. Got some cheddar here. Oh, I think I hear something. Uh-oh. Oh boy. Oh boy. Look who it is. Come on, Dale. You want some cheese? How did you know? This woke you up out of a dead sleep. This woke you up out of a dead sleep. Dale, can you give us a shake? Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Dale, give us a shake. Very good, very good. All right, actually, let's show everybody how good of a trickster you are. Dale, come. On the carpet. Sit. Down. Roll over. No, 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 no. Dale, sit. Hey, Mr. Excited. Down. Roll over. Well, that was pretty good for into the couch. Be gentle. Gentle. Ah! Oh, there goes my finger. I only have... Ah! 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 You little stinker. You're licking the cheese off my fingers.